I'm going to show you how I made $365,000 on one single day trade, the patterns I used so that you can do it too. So let's go and take a look at my chart right here. This is a 15-minute chart. This is what allows me to day trade consistently and profitably. It basically takes a candlestick, opens it up, and breaks it down in a 15-minute time frame. So each one of these candles is 15 minutes. Now, people will say that 15 minutes is too long of a time frame. There's people that will use 5 minutes. There's people that will use 1 minute. I have found that anything between 5 minutes and 15 minutes is kind of all the same. It gives you enough of a microscope to be able to execute these trades. Now, when we look at this right here, this is a specific ticker symbol that I trade almost exclusively, and it's LABU. It is a 3-time levered biotech ticker. It means that it's going to move 3 times as fast as the overall market, and the benchmark is the S&P 500. So if the S&P 500 moves 10 points, this is going to move 30 points, for an example. The reason that I like trading this is because it carries that volatility. It gives me the opportunity to make a lot of money very quickly. Now, with that being said, you can lose a lot of money very quickly. But let me show you the exact trade that I went in on that I was able to profit $365,000. Now, looking at this trade setup, there's certain things that I want to look at first. I want to make sure that my stochastic is in the sweet spot, meaning that it is over 80%. If I am not over 80%, there is nothing for me to do. I am going to sit down here. So this area, in this area between 80 and 20%, this is all no man's land. Absolute no man's land. You do not want to execute trades there. You want to give yourself the highest probability to make money, and that is when you are over 80% when you're going long. And that's exactly what we had here in the morning, starting with LABU. So the first thing we look for is, of course, the trend, making sure we're in the sweet spot. Number 2, we want to make sure that the volume is there. Volume is gasoline to the car. This is where you are not going to go anywhere unless you have that gasoline in your car. If you hit the accelerator, it's not going to go anywhere. Volume is the same thing to the stock market. As soon as you get that volume pushing through, what's going to happen? Well, your stock price is going to raise up. And that's exactly what we saw here right off the bat in the morning, 9:30 in the morning. I bought this stock right here at $156.69. This was my entry point. Now I'm in it. Now the emotions start. You have to be able to control those. You have a lot of money on the line. Maybe this is your first trade. Maybe this is your 1,000th trade, but you have a lot of money on the line. You still have to be able to control the emotion. That is an extremely important part of day trading because things happen so quickly, and you're going to see your account move up. 1 second it's going to be up $100. The next second it's going to be down $200. The next second it's going to be up $500. That is what can happen, especially when you trade these 3-time levered ETFs. Now, we are in this thing. As I said, the emotional control is important because remember, we don't see any of this. We don't see that this is going to be a profitable trade. All we know is that we have right now a candle with volume in the sweet spot. And notice we're moving around here and this thing is coming up here, giving us this little wick on top. That wick can be scary because what you're looking at right now is you entered down here, your stock price moved up on you, you had a lot of conviction, this looks really good, you're really happy. At some point this is filled, it's going all the way to the top, and then you start to get this little pullback that happens, right? This is when traders lose. They look at this and say, you know what? I was up, let's call it $150. I was up $150. So why do traders exit here? Why do people leave so much money on the table? This is a very, very important thing to realize. Guys, this thing moved up. You're in this and it's moving up and it's moving up, and you realize at this point what happens? Well, you're going to move the stock price up and then it's going to come all the way back down on you. And you finish the candle right here. So at some point during this trade, I was up $120,000. I was up 3%. I bought this thing at $156.69. It ran to this high of $161.40, and then it pulled back down. It pulled back down from $161.40 to $160.01. That's a big loss. It's not so much a loss, but you're losing your profits. You see the stock price move up, and then you're so happy, and then it pulls back down. This is where a lot of people would exit their trade because they look at only the stock price. They look at the profit loss that they're making. They don't pay attention to the most important thing here, and that is the trend. They don't pay attention to this. the trend, the beautiful trend that we have that's telling us the stock is going to continue going up. They don't pay attention, or they just overlook or don't care about and don't trust that the volume is absolutely phenomenal. They don't trust that they had an engulfing candlestick that proved that this could get up here. The reason that there's so many buyers here is because there's buyers in this thing. It sounds so simple, but people want to buy this thing. I knew that when this was happening, yes, I went from 120,000 profit to call it 100,000 profit. You look at this and say, no, I'm sticking with this. My trend is still with me. I trust what's going to happen next. Now you move on to the second 15-minute period. Looking in retrospect and seeing this during real time, your volume just continues to explode. You just keep moving higher and higher and higher. And that's a great thing. That means that buyers are in the stock. Trust the volume. You have to trust the volume. Realize that there are people putting fuel into the car that is going to propel you forward. Not only that, your trend is actually getting better. Your trend is starting to move even higher. The higher and the closer you move to 100%, the better off you're going to be. The more conviction you can actually have in your trade. Now, what happens in the following candle? This is going into the 45 minutes into the market, from 30 to 45 minutes. You realize the volume kind of fell off a little bit, right? But it's still green. It's still green. It means that there's still buyers in it, just not as many. But what is the important thing that you're looking for here? What gives you that conviction to stay in even though the volume is falling off a little bit? Well, it's higher than average. It's higher than this yellow line. That's number one. And number two, look at your stochastic. It just keeps creeping higher. It keeps creeping more towards that 100%. So it's not so much that you need to look at this and say, it's one singular metric. It's not just stochastic or just trend. It's not just the volume. It's not just engulfing candlesticks. It's all of those things put together that give you the conviction to push forward. So you're probably saying at this point, well, sure, we're up a bunch of money. When do we exit? And that's a great question, and something that clearly, as I just showed, a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people don't trust it. A lot of people exit early. A lot of people stay too long. I'm going to show you how and why I exited a certain position. So let's continue on with our trend. And I'm going to fast forward here a little bit. You notice this thing stayed above 80% for quite a lot of time. It actually went into the afternoon. It went to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you finally reversed down. Now, did I wait until 2 o'clock in the afternoon? No. This is where I took some of my experience and used it to my advantage. And not only that, I want to divert it for a second. You remember at the beginning of this video, I said, LABU is one of the few stocks that I day trade. I said I almost exclusively trade it. And I do that because I learned the behavior of this stock. This stock has emotions. It's like a person. It does the same thing. I know that LABU every single morning is either going to do this, it's going to go straight up, or it's going to come straight down. And if you go back and look at the charts for LABU, it has done that every single morning since probably 2013 or whenever this thing was incepted. You need to realize that your stock is a person. You have to understand the emotion that they have. This one, for instance, is a morning person. It gets going right away, and I take advantage of that. I know in the afternoon, it putters out. It doesn't really do a lot. And at the end of the day, it'll either dive back down or it'll rally back up for the last 15 minutes or so. But the morning is the most important part. So depending on what stock you trade, recognize the behavior that it has and take advantage of that. And that's why sticking to 1 or 2 stocks for day trading is so important. Now let's continue on. We're in this thing. We're profitable in this thing. We're charging forward. And you probably say, well, Mo, why didn't you exit here? Well, I didn't exit here because we still had buying volume coming in. My trend was still fine. I really didn't see a reason to get out of it. Going here, we still had good buying volume over average. And we started to get selling volume here. Why didn't I exit when we started getting selling volume? Because I've been talking about buying volume so much. Well, number one, the trend was okay. It really wasn't diving on me. And number two, look where this bottom was right here. That bottom on this thing, on this little doji, was $167 on the nose. And you realize that this next candle, the low of this candle was $167.36, meaning that it didn't even try to encroach on the previous low. So the previous low, 167 on the nose, where I put this yellow dot, is exactly the point where I'm probably looking and saying, if it drops below that, I'm going to exit and take my profits. But That didn't happen. We continued buying. We continued the buying volume. We continued with the trend moving forward. And this thing just kept going and going and going. Now, I was getting to the point and I was saying, all right, I have to be thinking about an exit. I'm very profitable at this point, and I know that LABU typically tends to switch directions at some point. You notice here, the volume was good, it was average, and then it started dropping below average, below average, below average, below average. So what was my exit point? That's the question. So now I'm going to show you guys a little trick. I am going to take this over to my daily chart and my long-term chart and just see what resistance am I running into. Notice here, we kind of peaked up here and then it kind of kept hitting that same level. Something wasn't happening. Something just wasn't moving. This one, actually, this little upside down, this little spindle or inverse hammer, this thing kind of sputtered out right there at 171 and change. So you notice when I come over here to my chart, we're seeing a lot of resistance up here. This is just multiple days of kind of sitting at that same level, can't break through it. And that's what we're starting to see on the day trading chart. That's what we're starting to see over here. So I said to myself, when this thing hit 171, it hit it and it just fell back down. This candle, however, went to 171.04. So it did peek through, but it ended up pulling back a little bit. And then it continued on. I actually sold right here at $171 on the nose. Why? Because I realized that this thing was having a hard time breaking through that 171 level. So as this was going, this was a high of $170.95. I arbitrarily went in there and I said, you know what? I'm just going to cut my losses. I'm going to take my gains here. And if this thing rallies any further, I'm going to let it go. Stochastics getting a little bit wonky. Most important part, volume down here is completely starting to fall apart. I'm going to say at $171, I'm going to exit. And that is exactly what happened. Now, you're looking at this and saying, well, it kept going. Well, that's where the emotional control has to happen. You have to realize that this thing is going to continue to move higher. It is going to continue to move higher, but eventually this volume is going to do this. And that is exactly what happened. So in the end, a $365,000 profit, a 9.13% return in a single day trading. Now, there's a lot of people out there who will just go for a certain percentage point a day. Maybe they'll go for 1 or 2% per day, and that's perfectly fine. But there are going to be days out there, and I'm the person that just goes for 1 to 2% per day, but there are going to be days out there where the setup is so good and so sweet that you stick with it and you just run that thing, and eventually you will have those days that you make 9.13% with a lot of conviction. So you might ask the question, how the heck do you find a stock like LABU? How do you find that stock that you want to have that personal relationship with and understand what's happening with it day to day? Well, it's very simple. You come over here to Yahoo Finance and you come to markets and you come to most actives and the gainers. So most actives means the most volume of the day out of all of the stocks out there. And gainers is the biggest gainer percentage gain. So you click on most actives, and this is not a one-time thing. I don't want you to come in here one day and say, okay, it's SoundHound getting 86 million trades per day and Tesla and AMD and NVIDIA. Look at SoundHound. SoundHound is getting right now 86.9 million shares traded. Look at its average, 42. So something's going on. Maybe it's earnings. It doesn't matter what it is. But the point is, it's abnormal volume. So what I want you to do is come here every day for the next 5 to 10 days and write down all of these companies, and then come back tomorrow and see what's in this top 25, and then come back the next day, what's in the top 25, and so on and so forth. And then pick from those maybe 5 to 10 and say, okay, these are in the top 5 to 10 every single day. I'm going to look at it that way. Another way you can do it is if you are an experienced person and you understand, you could come and type in 3-time levered ETFs and come and see what is out there. Just go through and see what's out there, and you'll see EDC. It doesn't really matter what. For me, I don't care that it's biotech. It's 3 times levered. You can pick any one of these. Just find ones that have that consistent movement every morning, every afternoon, what have you. This might seem complicated and it might seem overwhelming, and I promise you it was for everybody at the beginning, including myself. I took a lot of time paper trading and understanding exactly how the market worked before I ever started trading real money. Remember, it's taken me 20 plus years to get to this point. I will be here every step of the way with you. Join me live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, where we trade live, often doing day trades, and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you on the next video.